Hi, I'm Lijia Lin from East China Normal University. Today, I'm gonna share with you a empirical study my student and I conducted in a secondary school. It's about the benefits of teaching. In the literature, especially the peer tutoring literature, it has been quite clear that teaching is a complex process which involves multiple stages. For example, preparation for teaching, explanation, and interaction. In recent years, there has been more theories emerged to account for the effects of teaching. One of them is the generative learning theory. So we want to systematically investigate the effects of teaching. So the first variable we investigated is teaching expectancy, which is an individual studies the material with the expectation of a later teaching demand. Research has shown that with teaching expectancy, learners can deeply engage in the learning material, which lead to enhanced learning. But most of the studies have been conducted in research labs with the college student population. The second variable we would like to investigate is the interactivity of teaching, which is the extent to which a teacher or a tutor interacts with the students. It can be a direct way of teaching. For example, a teacher presents the content, explains the content, and provides feedback to students in a face-to-face manner, which is quite traditional. And also it can be an indirect way of teaching, for example, providing written explanations or mentally imagine teaching the content to students. Like I just pointed out that most of the studies regarding the effects of learning by teaching has conducted in research labs. So in those studies, there was a lack of interaction in those teaching conditions. Those learners were asked to face the camera and recorded their teaching activity by mentally imagine teaching the content to a peer or a student. So in the literature, some researchers refer to that teaching activity as teaching on video, but we believe that this kind of imagined teaching is actually consistent with the imagination effect in the cognitive load research. The imagination effect is actually a technique that a learner internally visualizes concepts or procedures in their working memory to form meaningful structure. So in cognitive load research, empirical studies have been revealed that quite favor to the imagination technique. But this imagination effect has been applied to like studying the work examples. It hasn't been studied for imagined teaching. So the purpose of a study was to compare the effects of peer teaching to imagined teaching. And also we would like to extend the positive teaching expectancy effect revealed in the literature to a younger student population. So the study was a 2x3 between subjects design. We manipulated two independent variables. One is teaching expectancy with two levels, teaching expectancy and testing expectancy. The other is interactivity of teaching with three levels, peer teaching, imagined teaching, and no teaching. We actually collected data from almost 600 students from a secondary school in China, and they were asked to study a paper-based science text which describes the Doppler effect. The material includes both texts and static pictures. We measured their prior knowledge, comprehension, perceived difficulty, and motivation. We used 10 multiple choice questions to measure their comprehension. We implement the comprehension test immediately after the instruction and 1 week after the instruction. And we use the identical comprehension tests, but we placed the items in different order. In terms of procedure, first students need to complete the demographic survey and pre-test. Then they were randomly assigned into different conditions. For those who were assigned into the teaching expectancy condition, the instructions were like, please study the material and be prepared to teach the material to a peer. And for the testing expectancy condition, the instructions were, please study the material and be prepared to be tested later. Then all students were asked to read the material for 10 minutes. And then for those who were assigned in the peer teaching condition, they were asked to teach the content to a peer sitting next to them. And for those who were assigned in the imagined teaching condition, they were asked to mentally imagine teaching the content to a peer. And for those who were assigned in the no teaching condition, they just continue reading the material for 5 minutes. After that, we implement the immediate comprehension test and self-report questionnaire, which measured their perceived difficulty and motivation. And 1 week later, they came back. We again measured their comprehension. We conducted an uncover on immediate comprehension, and we find that peer teaching was better than no teaching. And we also find that imagined teaching was better than no teaching. We also did an uncover on delayed comprehension, but we only find that imagined teaching was better than no teaching. We conducted an ANOVA on perceived difficulty, and we find a significant interaction, so we conducted a simple main fact analysis at the post-hoc analysis. And the results are a little messy, but to be brief, the results shows that the effects of teaching expectancy depend upon the type of teaching activities students were involved. We also conducted an ANOVA on motivation. We also find a significant interaction, so we conducted a simple main fact analysis. The results are, again, still a little messy, but basically the effects of teaching expectancy was dependent upon the type of teaching activity. So to summarize, we find that peer teaching was better on immediate comprehension, but no better on the delayed comprehension than no teaching. According to the peer tutoring literature, it's possible that students in the peer teaching condition focused on rote learning. For example, maybe one student asked the other, what is Doppler effect? And the other answered. And then they take turn answer what is the Doppler effect, and that's it. So if that happened, then those peer teaching condition was actually quite foster rote learning. We actually didn't find a significant difference between peer teaching and imagined teaching on immediate or delayed comprehension. So it's possible that students in the peer teaching condition were disengaged. For example, they may ask and answer some rote learning questions. For example, what is Doppler effect? And after that, they just spend the remaining time maybe chatting or do something by their own. So they were totally disengaged. It's quite possible, but one of our limitations of the study is that we didn't collect any process data about the peer teaching condition. So we hope in the future we can address that issue. We did find some superiority of imagined teaching, especially on the delayed comprehension. This is consistent with the existing theories and empirical studies that shows that imagined teaching fosters meaningful learning, but we find that the effects of imagined teaching on perceived difficulty and motivation were dependent upon teaching expectancy. So we believe that maybe it's because the measures, we only have one item to measure perceived difficulty, and we have only 3 measures to measure motivation. So maybe in the future we may need to come up with more reliable measures. One final note, if you look at the literature, those studies reported large effect sizes, but in our study, our effect sizes are small to medium, not large. But we want to point out that our study was conducted in a school setting with a secondary school student population. And in the literature, the studies were mostly conducted in research labs with a college student population. So that may explain the differences we see in those effect sizes. But maybe we need more replications for that. That's it for the presentation. Thank you for your attention.